Good morning, everybody. Happy Mother's Day. I've made about 1,200 masks so far, so I've decided to do a revised tutorial, just a little bit cleaner format than my original face mask video. That was the first video I'd ever made, so it's a little sloppy. So we're just going to do it neat and tidy today with all three sizes. This video will give you the option to either use elastic and do the mask around your ear, or you can use jersey knit, which you can also tie around your ear, or you can use to tie behind your head. It also has a filter pocket, it's washable, it's reusable, and it should hold up for quite a while. So when I first started making masks, I was just trying to crank them out as fast as possible to get them to the people in the hospitals and whatnot. Now I'm getting a lot of orders from people who are getting ready to go back to work, and they really want something fun to wear. There's one lady on Instagram named It's Lisa Marie, and she specifically requested 10 not hideous masks. And she's been doing a mask series where she matches her eye makeup to her masks, which I thought was pretty cool. So if you have time, go on Instagram and check her out. I'll put a link at the end of the video. For the adults, same as the original, 9 inches by 18 inches. This size is really great because if you're working with fat quarters, it gives you 2 masks for every fat quarter. For older children, 5 and up, 5 to 12 years old, I'm doing 8 by 16. And for little kids, 5 and under, I'm doing 7 by 13. For all of the elastic, I'm cutting at 14 inches. You can use 1/8 inch elastic or 1/4 inch elastic. Anything bigger than that's a little rough on the ears. If you don't have elastic, just use jersey yarn. I'll put a link to my video on how to make jersey yarn. Literally, you just cut up an old t-shirt, stretch it, roll it, and this is what can be used for tie behind the mask. Tie behind the head masks. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is take our fabric and fold it in half with the right sides together, lining up the raw edge. We're going to make 2 stitches. We're going to come down, leave about a 2 or 3 inch gap, enough to fit your fingers through, and then we're going to come down to the bottom. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm back stitching at the ends of my stitches to keep it from unraveling. See, you should have a little space right here in the center, just big enough to get your fingers through. This is where you'll insert your filter. Okay, so we're going to take our piece to the ironing board, and I'm just going to open it up. This does not have to be exactly perfect. Nothing about this has to be exactly perfect. Just try to get your seam right there in the middle, and then we're going to press it open. If your fabric is working against you, just spray it with a little bit of water, and then when you iron it, you'll get a much nicer crease. So all you want to do is press that stitch open, and see, here's our little pocket. The next thing we're going to do is stitch down our open edges, leaving about a finger width at the top. This will be a space for us to slide our elastic in later. So as you can see, I left about a finger width open on each edge. That's where we're going to put our elastic. I want to show you this. As you can see, it's not lined up totally perfect. I may have cut it a little wonky, but that's not a big deal. Don't let all these, big sewing words and perfect tutorials discourage you from trying this project. It's really easy. It only needs to be relatively square and it'll be just fine. The next thing we're going to do is you're going to put your fingers in this little filter pocket opening that you made, and you're going to turn it inside out. Okay, and get your fingers in there, poke out the corners. And if you have either a chopstick or a knitting needle like this, you can use that to get in there. You could even use a pencil, just make sure it's not too sharp. You'll want to puncture a hole in your pretty fabric. So I use that to just slide along the seams. Makes it a little easier. And see, we have a square. Just gonna iron this flat, spraying with water, which is not mandatory. If you have water, it just makes it, you know, crisper edges, but you don't have to have that. Just a regular hot iron will work. And if for some reason you don't have a sewing machine, you can hand sew every one of these stitches. And if you don't have an iron, you can finger press, which literally just means using your fingers to press a seam open. So for example, this is our older children's mask. If I didn't have an iron, I would just use pressure and slide my fingers down the seam to crease it, and that's still good enough to sew. Okay, so here's where we have the two options. One of my favorite tools is my hemostats. They're like little grippy scissors. They make threading the elastic really easy. So we're just gonna stick it through. See the hole? Pinch it and pull. You don't have to have these. Obviously, a lot of people don't have these laying around. You can attach a safety pin to the end of your elastic and use that as something hard to help you wiggle it through so it comes out the other end. You could also use a good pair of tweezers. You could use eyebrow tweezers. Anything really that you can stick through and grip on the end makes life a lot easier when threading elastic. So this mask will be the traditional around the ear elastic. Now this fun pinup mask is for a buddy of mine who's a bartender. He's getting ready to go back to work and he requested a tie-on mask. So for the tie-on mask, I'm using the jersey knit. This stuff's really nice and soft. If you're, I prefer the elastic just because it's got a really firm hold, but if you're going to be wearing your mask all day, you may want to consider this option because it's going to be a little bit easier on your ears. There are also, I'm sure everybody's seen the headbands that have the buttons on them. The nurses have been wearing to relieve their ears. I haven't made any of those yet. I probably will fairly soon. I've just been trying to get all these mask orders taken care of. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pin in the pleats. I'm using glass-headed pins, which is what I always use because if I iron over them, they're not going to melt. I got 1,000 of them on Amazon for like $11. This isn't even half of what I got. So they're definitely worth the investment. So I'm going to fold this 3 times. The reason I do the 3 pleated fold is because in the very beginning when I started making masks, there were several hospitals requesting a 3 pleated fold. I like the way it looks. It gives the mask a nice crisp look. I've also noticed that a lot of the people that have the flat fronted face mask, it doesn't fit their face very well. This is going to stretch and move, so if somebody has a smaller face or a larger face, it's going to fit them regardless. Whereas sometimes you see those flat fronted masks and they look really silly on a person with a really big head. So the first pleat's going to be just around 1 inch. I'm just using my fingers to pinch and fold. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you put the pleats in and they look funny, you can take it out and redo it. I've done this, over 1,000 times now, so I'm getting pretty good at it. There we go. As you can see, I try to keep these nice and straight. It doesn't really matter to me that all 3 of these are the exact width, as long as they look relatively uniform and it looks like a fairly straight rectangle. The one thing I do want to mention is when you're putting in your pleats, try to get a good bite of fabric in there. You don't want them to be like this. You want them to be a good solid chunk. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to iron this flat. In the original tutorial, I wasn't bothering to iron them, which again, if you don't have an iron, it's not a big deal. Just sew through it and the mask will still function. So as you can see, I can iron right over these pins because they are glass-headed pins. If they weren't, I would just iron over here, iron over there, and iron over here. And you can sew this first and iron after if you prefer, especially if you have plastic pins. I'm just doing it first because it makes it a lot flatter, so it runs through the machine a little bit easier. One thing I want to mention about your sewing machine that a lot of beginner sewers don't even realize is you probably have a knob up here, and it will adjust your presser foot pressure, which means if I turn it, my foot's going to push down harder on my fabric, and if I turn it the other way, the foot is going to raise up a little bit. So you want to keep it a little bit raised because this is a little thick and chunky, and it'll just go through your machine a lot smoother. Now I'm butting my presser foot up against the elastic, making sure I don't sew through it, and we're just gonna, I'm gonna stitch down and then I'm gonna back stitch, and then I'm gonna stitch down and then I'm gonna back stitch. I'm gonna stitch down and back stitch. That way I essentially have 2 layers of thread running the whole length of my mask. You can stitch down, take it out, and stitch down again if you want to, but to me this is just easier because I don't have to pull the mask out and I don't have 2 sets of threads to clip. I should also point out that I put my pins fairly towards the center. That way I can run my presser foot down without having to pull them out every time. Now I'm just going to do that on the other side. And there you go. We're pretty much all done. Now all we have to do is pull out the pins and snip the threads. Okay, so here's our finished mask. I've just been tugging the elastic to make sure it can make sure it can move freely through here. Don't pull it out because it's a pain in the butt to get it back in after this stage. If it doesn't move freely and you caught it with your sewing machine, then the best thing to do is just pull out your stitches and redo it. Now, if you want to, for these, what you're going to do is you're going to tie the elastic in a knot like this on both sides. I tie it loosely at first just because you may not like it. And the other thing is a lot of people tie it a little too tight at first, and after wearing it throughout the day, they realize maybe that's a little too tight, or they put it through the wash and some elastic will shrink, and then they're going to want to adjust it after it's been washed and make it a little looser. So if once you get it to where you really like it, you can go ahead and snip these threads. You can even pull this knot and loop it through into the inside of your mask if you don't like the way the knot looks. Most people don't seem to really care, but some people are fairly picky. So you have your 2 loops. Put it around your ears, extend it over your nose and under your chin, okay? And that's the best thing about these masks with the pleats, is that they really have a lot of, they have this fan effect, so it gives you really good coverage. I like this one. I like my mask nice and snug. Not everybody likes that, everybody's different. My boyfriend has really small ears, so it bothers him. So here's one that I made with the jersey knit, the t-shirt material. So as you can see, the loop is a lot smaller because this stuff stretches way more. And I left the tassels, I don't trim them because it gives me the option I also don't tie them too tight, because if you decide you want to wear it tied behind your head, if it's bothering your ears, you're going to want to be able to untie it. And then, so you can tie it behind your head. This is a great option. It gives you both styles. It's very comfortable. And most people have t-shirt material laying around their house that they can cut up, whereas elastic is getting kind of hard to find and fairly overpriced. So here you can see the back, the front, and that's about it. The other thing I guess I should show you is here. This is the opening, so if you have filter material, you can buy the filter material. You can cut up a HEPA vacuum bag. You can cut up a HEPA air filter into a rectangle and just put it in there the same way you'd put padding into a woman's bathing suit. You know, just wedge it into the little opening. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I didn't start this channel with any intention of other than trying to teach people how to make masks so that they could just get it done and have something for their family. But now that I've got a handful of followers, I'm going to continue to do videos. I do so professionally, and I have a couple custom orders coming up for a baby quilt, also for a scrub cap. So some of the nurses are asking me to make scrub caps. I haven't made one in several years, so I'm going to sit down this week and you know, work out a pattern, and I'll be doing a tutorial on that too. So if you'd like to learn how to sew anything from masks to baby quilts to hopefully eventually I can do some videos on art quilts, you know, please like, subscribe. If you have questions, just put it in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.